Oh, my volume down. Hold on.
Hi
Hi,
there.
how are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm good.
Great.
Thank you. The slides look great. Do you want to
Okay.
see if you can share? Does it
Yeah,
have
let's try to do that.
just so we can see?
Okay. Let's see how I do this. Do you know where I share from Zoom? I've never shared through Zoom, only through Teams.
Typically, it's right at the bottom. There should be a share button.
Okay, got it. Okay, so I'm going to share to.
I know it's always hard to figure out which which screen to share to.
Okay.
Okay, perfect.
All right, does that work?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. And
We could probably just leave it on that so it's not like our heads.
yeah, sounds good.
It's always like the first people on. You're like, yeah, I think there's about 45 signed up. So usually about half of those show up. So should be a good
Okay, we'll
class.
see how it goes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, I'm going to start admitting people in.
Okay.
Hi, Megan.
Hello.
How you
Hey,
doing?
good.
Oh,
Carrie.
and Stacy. I
Yes.
just saw
Hey.
that you're pending on that on the condo on the lake.
Oh, yeah, it's closed.
Oh, it's closed. The
Yeah.
sign's still up. I was like, oh, had that been
Oh,
on the market for a while?
um, no, actually, it closed Friday. It was only on for like a month. I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
we pended right away. Yeah. Yeah, Sharon
Those are
Crockett.
super cute.
Yeah, I know. I love that.
We could sit on the same side and then we're actually in
Oh,
the, so we're not like, hello.
hello. Okay.
I'll come over by you.
Okay.
We'll probably wait till like 5 after to get started because you know how that goes, or a
Yep.
couple minutes after at least.
Okay.
So
Okay.
hi guys, we're gonna wait just a couple minutes and then um we'll get started. Hi, Dawn.
What's up?
What's up?
Start my video. Hey, there's the Megan and Stacy show.
Okay, we'll wait a couple minutes for people that just joined. And then we will start. Okay, we can get started. Thanks everyone for joining. I feel like condos have been a hot topic lately, and I think we're just going to see more and more of them because it is pushing that way that condos are affordable housing. So there's a lot of ins and outs to condos. We have Claudia from our condo department here to just go over the basics, help answer any questions that anyone has. So I will let Claudia take it from here. If you have any questions, if I set it up properly, which technology, you can go ahead and put it in the chat and I will make sure that we get questions answered as well. So Claudia, you can take it.
Thanks, Carrie. Hi, so I'm Claudia Gott. I am one of the condo approval managers here at Movement Mortgage. I deal exclusively with the West Coast, so that includes your group. And I'm excited to be here to share the knowledge that we have and what Movement has to offer. I don't know if you guys are aware or not, but Movement was ranked the #1 lender in the state of Washington for condominiums. That is both in units and in dollars. So big round of applause to Carrie and her team and everyone else at Movement in the state of Washington. So we're going to get started with, what's a condo? So most of you know, most likely, but just as a recap, because we're just going to take this as like a basics course. So condominiums are individually owned units where only airspace is conveyed. Ownership includes interest in the common areas, as defined by the CCNRs that they have. So that could just be the walkways, or it could include the swimming pool or clubhouse or whatever they have. And what's a townhouse property? Is that a property type? Trick question, because it is not a legal property type. Townhomes are just a construction style. So a condo can look like anything. It can look like your standard, what everybody envisions, which is like a high rise or a mid rise. But it could also look like this. It could just be what people call a townhome. It could also be a PUD. So there's also detached condominiums also that can look like an SFR, but it's actually a condominium. So, getting back to what's, sorry about that. So with the PUD, the difference between a PUD and a condo is, unlike condos, land is conveyed with a PUD with each unit. And that's the difference between a planned unit development and a condominium. So there are two different review types for conventional lending when it comes to condominiums. You've got your full review and you've got your limited review. So full review is required for new construction projects. It's also can be used for established projects, and a budget reviewer is required when it comes to full reviews. Review of the association's fidelity and liability insurance is also required. The project also must have at least 50% owner occupancy or second home to do a full review. And when it comes to determining its eligibility, we also will be looking at the number of delinquencies or delinquent unit owners in the project. And that is based on not only the standard dues, but also the special assessment dues, because those are both calculated or taken into account when doing a full review. So with limited reviews, those are for established projects only. You can't use a limited review on a new construction project. There's a bit less documentation involved and review involved. There's no budget review. There's no review with the fidelity bond either. The percentage of owner-occupied units in the project also doesn't factor in. It doesn't matter. So if you've got a project that's got, you know, a high number of investor or rentals in the project, a lot of people assume, oh, it's automatically a non-warrantable project. That's not necessarily the case. So as long as your borrower qualifies for limited review, and that's based on their CLTV, so that would be like a max 90% for owner occupied and 75% or for second homes or an investor, then you can move forward with the limited review with the project having high investor concentration. Another thing is with a limited review, if there is a high amount of unit owners that are delinquent on their dues, the guideline is 15%. That's not factored into the limited review process. The only thing that's factored in as far as delinquencies is the number of unit owners that are delinquent on their special assessment. Again, not on their standard dues. So documentation required for both reviews. You can see it's a little bit more lengthy for full review, like I'd already discussed. We'll have the questionnaire and the budget, the insurance. Another thing that's happened within the past few years, as you guys might be aware of, is both Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac require now that if an inspection has been completed in the project within the past 3 years, that the lender is required to review that inspection to ensure there is no critical repairs that are needed. So that would be required. Also review of all special assessments. Limited review, like I indicated earlier, there's no review of the budget. We're only interested in the delinquencies as it relates to the special assessments. Investor concentration exceeding 50% is also acceptable. So kind of segueing into that special assessment and inspection report that I was just speaking about that we have to review. The newest trends that are causing headaches in the condo world are the special assessments, so the critical repairs, and insurance. And unfortunately, I'm sure some of you have already run into those hiccups along your condo path. So the reason for these is because of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac basically updating their guidelines requiring review of this. At this time, condo projects are aging and a lot have not kept up on their routine maintenance. And many of the condos have put themselves in positions where the only way to fund the completion of these deferred maintenance items is to special assess. So while the amount of the special assessment is considered, it's what the special assessment is for that is often the issue. So especially what we're seeing in the Washington area, you've got these, condominium projects that were built in the early 80s, and they've got these wood decks. And with the climate that you guys have, a lot of these wood decks are rotting and deteriorating, and they need to be replaced. So that's where the special assessment may come in. And now you've got an inspection report because they had an inspection of the balconies done. So that required us to review the inspection report. And in order to move forward with a conventional loan, all those repairs need to have been made already. So if there was an inspection report that was done in 2023 for the balconies, and it indicated that repairs needed for, whatever units, we would need evidence that those repairs were already completed in order for us to move forward with conventional approval.
There's
So,
a question. What if
Sure.
there isn't, what if there hasn't been an inspection in the last 3 years? Are we
That's fine.
requiring
That's
that
great.
or?
That's great, because the requirement is only if they have had an inspection, not that they must have had an inspection. So that's the difference. So no inspection is great news in a way. But if there was an inspection, like I said, then we are required to review that. But that's the difference, is that they're not requiring an inspection be done within the past 3 years. They're only saying if there was one, then we're required to review it. So this is what I've laid out here is what Fannie Mae has defined as being a critical repair. So mold, water intrusion, material deficiencies, advanced physical deterioration, like I was talking about when it comes to balconies and decks, failure to pass any kind of inspection with the city or state, and any unfunded repairs that'll cost more than $10,000 per unit.
And then if this is coming up on an inspection, what is required to kind of pass through this? Full repair of that or repair
Yes.
happening in the future?
Yeah, full repair. So if we do have an inspection report that was done, or they're saying that there is a special assessment and it was due to either the roof replacement, not because of its age, but because there was a leak in the roof, or there was something faulty with the roof that required an emergency repair. That could be considered a critical repair, especially if there's water intrusion, because water intrusion is one of the things that they are looking for or consider to be a critical repair. So in that case, in order to move forward with conventional lending, those repairs need to have already been completed.
Is that something we're seeing more in the Pacific Northwest too, just because of the environment and the age of the condos around here?
Not necessarily more, but it's definitely on the rise with, I think, across the board. I've also dealt with, working condo approvals on the East Coast and the Midwest, and they still have the same issues as well. California really has a hard time because the state passed a law requiring these condominium and apartment complexes to obtain a balcony inspection report. And so a lot of issues are coming up with that. So it's not necessarily just the environment, but that is a factor as well, especially with the materials that were being used, when these projects were originally created. I think now they're using materials that are more resilient to weather conditions. So another issue that's coming up a lot is insurance, like I had spoke about earlier. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac also updated their guidelines that put a maximum requirement on the percentage of deductible for the HOA's policy. So no deductible can exceed more than 5% of the policy. And that's been a pretty big hiccup. A way to, our first line of defense, if we get a certificate of insurance that shows that it's got, 6%, 7% deductible for, let's say, wind and hail, we will reach out to the insurance agent and we will ask them if there is a endorsement on the policy which caps it out at 5%. And sometimes there is. And so then we're able to move forward with a conventional review. I've had one instance where the deductible did exceed 5%, and I had this wonderful insurance agent that was able to restructure the policy so that the premium stayed the same. But what she did was she made it so that she increased the overall coverage amount or policy amount so that so it lowered the deductible that was higher, lowered to 5%. So there's some creative things that some of the insurance agents are doing now. And I think the insurance agents are also catching wind of this 5% thing, because I'm seeing deductibles coming in at 4.8%, 4.9%. So they're just right under that 5% threshold, and they're able to go through. So that's fabulous. But that is a big thing that's happening in the condo world, and that's across the country, as far as the insurance deductibles go.
And the HOA has to approve all of that as well. So it really depends on the
Yes.
HOA, correct? Because some
Yes,
of them are not wanting to adjust their policies.
Yeah, and that's why we're seeing an increase, and that's why Fannie Mae is putting this, and Freddie Mac are putting these caps on these deductibles, because what's happening is these insurance policy premiums are just, increasing, just like your own personal homeowners insurance policy is increasing. So are the association's policies. So in order to, get a better deal, with a lower premium, they're going with a policy that's got a higher deductible and a lower premium. So they're just looking at the premium amount, because who doesn't want to save money? But what they don't realize that they're doing is, when they do that, they are prohibiting the association from being able to have their unit owners refi or sell their unit with conventional lending. So another thing that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
If the insurance does come in and we need to adjust, what are you seeing for turn times on how long that's taking? Because you've got to get the approval and kind of restructure. So,
really, that's so dependent on the management company and how responsive they are. But typically we'll get a response as to whether or not, because the management company doesn't necessarily make the call themselves, right? They just reach out to the board and say, hey, are you willing to change your policy to meet conventional guidelines, and change the policy to a higher, maybe a bit higher of a premium, but lower deductible amount. And I would say that's taking probably about a week on average to get a response back. Any other questions on insurance so far? All good? All right. So another one that could come up in your area is also the fire coverage. So fire coverage, just as a reminder, fire coverage needs to be at 100% replacement cost as well. So what do you do if you do have a condo project that has a 7% insurance deductible, and the association is not willing to change their policy? That's going to be the difference between a warrantable and a non-warrantable condominium. So the difference between that is, warrantable projects obviously meet conventional guidelines, where non-warrantable projects don't meet conventional guidelines. Here at Movement, we offer loan program options for both warrantable and non-warrantable condo projects. We work with several non-warrantable investors and are delegated to approve condos based on their thresholds. We also have the ability to request exceptions for some of these investors for specialized situations, which are evaluated on a case-by-case basis. So for example, we have investors that were already delegated that will go up to a 10% insurance deductible. So we don't even have to skip a beat by, sending something to them, requesting an exception for something like that. We're already good to go on something. So we just keep on chugging along. Same with commercial space. We can go up to 50% commercial space if that's the need for that project.
correct me if I'm wrong, the non-warrantable programs, from what I have seen, they're wanting at least 10% down, if not more. Like that's not going to be your minimum down, or do we still have something at 3.5%?
I believe it is about 10%, but I haven't checked in a while, so
I'll
don't
double check
quote me
and
on
let you
that.
guys know in the follow-up
Yeah.
meeting.
Another thing I just wanted to mention that I forgot to mention was with the insurance deductibles, while Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have capped it at 5%, FHA has not changed their guidelines. So know that there is a workaround that. So if you do have a project where the deductible exceeds 5% and the association is not willing to change that, let's work to see if maybe your borrower can qualify for FHA and maybe the project is already FHA approved. And if it's not, that's okay because Movement can take care of the FHA approval as well. So that's an option. So getting to FHA, I've put in links for how to search their database so that you guys know. Some tips that I can share with you as far as searching for the projects is less is more. So if the project is, villas at, Peach Creek, just search villas and and the state and see what comes up. Because sometimes, they might put villas, they might put villa, they also might include a the in front of the villas.
Yeah,
So
they're very
you gotta
particular.
kind
It's
of
kind of weird.
manipulate that. I'm sorry, what was that, Carrie?
It's very finicky when you're
Yeah, it
looking
can
it up.
be
You
pretty
do have to
finicky.
play around with it.
Yes, definitely. So those are my tips for that is kind of less is more and try adding a the, try removing a the. As far as VA review or searching VA's database, same thing, less is more. Although with some condo projects, VA doesn't have it listed as the name of the condo project. They have it listed as the track number. So if you're trying to search for the project under the project name and you're not having any success, I recommend trying to find out what the track number is and seeing if you can search the website using the track number. So as I stated, Movement has the ability to process VA and FHA reviews for you. So we have the ability to do single unit approvals, which were previously known as spot approvals way back in the day. We also can do the DELWRAP approvals and HRAP approvals. DELWRAP approvals is where we have the ability to review the condo approval for full FHA review in-house. So it saves time from submitting the project to FHA for their review. FHA reviews, when you submit them to FHA, it takes about 4 weeks on average for them to turn around and give you that approval back. So our first go-to is doing a single unit approval in a project, which is, like I said, formerly known as a spot approval. The HUD approvals are good for 3 years. Once you get the full condo project approval, so that's the HRAP or the DELWRAP approval, not the single unit approval. Single unit approval is only for that specific unit alone, for that investor or that for that lender only.
And with the FHA approvals that we're doing in-house, so because we have those underwriters in-house, are we really seeing that 4 week turn time? Or I know that we try to set that expectation. Are things coming back a little bit faster than that?
It's kind of hit or miss because HUD has different, when we're submitting the project to FHA for review, they have several different offices that they go to depending on your area. So we might see that the Colorado office is, their turn time might be faster than the Santa Ana office. in California or the Philadelphia office in Pennsylvania. It just kind of depends. So that's where we just kind of blanket say on average about 4 weeks. It could
Okay.
be a little bit sooner. I've seen it sooner recently, but I don't want to promise you that it will be sooner. I'd rather
Yeah.
set the expectation to about 4 weeks. So that way, you know, if it comes in
Everyone's happy
sooner,
if it comes in
yeah,
early.
exactly. So everything's fabulous. If it's sooner, if it's not, then we already, you know, set that expectation. So, how do you avoid some of these issues either as the buyer's agent or the listing agent? So the best thing to do is be proactive as much as you can. So if you're a listing agent, try to get the documentation from the seller to see if they may be any hurdles ahead of the game. Unit owners should have access to the association's budget, their insurance, their reserve study, any litigation that the association is involved in. There should have been some kind of letter sent out to those unit owners. Same with special assessments. The unit owner should be aware of any special assessments that are in place. And ask about any recent inspections that they're aware of. If there was an inspection done in the property or on the project, I should say. That way,
Question about that? Oh, sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
So, so when you're doing a listing for a condo, should you go ahead and ask them to order a resale certificate at that time? Or so we have all that up front, or
You
what's best?
can,
Is that what you're saying? Or am I
not
some
necessarily.
misunderstanding?
No, not necessarily. The thing is with resale certificates, they do give some information, and all resale certs are different, as I'm sure you've seen. Some have more information than others, but typically they don't have as much information as a standard condominium questionnaire does. But what I'm saying as a listing agent is try to get what you can from that from the seller to see, okay, and then you can just forward that to Carrie and say, hey, Carrie, I'm going to be listing this project. This is what my client has so far. Here's a copy of the association's budget and the insurance. Can you send this over to your condo team for them to look at to see if we have any red flags here ahead of
The
time?
the condo
We get
team
like a
is
cheat.
is
Go ahead.
great. So whatever
Okay.
you have or any information, if you're just not finding, like even looking up VA approval or FHA, if you're like, I don't know, I can't do this, it's very easy for me to send it to the condo team. And once you have those docs, I can also send those over too. And they'll tell us just by looking at the insurance, like this is not eligible for a spot approval. We need to be, prepared to go through that full approval process or what they think will happen as far as when we submit.
Yeah, just like Carrie said, I mean, you don't necessarily have to get, this whole list of documents. If you are only able to obtain one thing, the insurance or just the budget, at least send that over to Carrie. She'll send it over to our team and we can take a look at it and say, okay, this budget looks fine. So we've already knocked one thing off the list, right? We already know the budget's not going to be an issue. But let's say the budget was an issue, then okay, now we already know that's going to be an issue and we can, advise what route to go at that point. Or just having the insurance. Hey, look, this has high deductible. So let's work with the association now to see if they can change that insurance policy so that it'll be easier for your client to sell that unit because it'll be easier for that buyer to get funding. So
And
it's
there's a
just stuff like
question,
that.
does
Yeah.
it cost the HOA to go through the approval process? And then any idea how likely or percentage of what is really going and getting approved?
It doesn't cost, I guess I'm not very clear on that question. Does it cost the HOA anything to get the condo approved?
Yeah.
No.
Is there any cost to the HOA? No.
To the association?
Yeah.
No, there is no cost. We don't charge to process an FHA approval for the project, like a full FHA approval, which will stay there for 3 years that any lender could use. We don't charge anything for that. We can do that for them. It's just, is the association willing to do that? Some associations have decided, you know what, we don't want FHA approval. So we're not going to give you the documentation for that because we don't want it. That's not too often, but it has happened.
That's
Where
very
they,
interesting.
yeah, where they just don't, I don't know,
Yeah.
preconceptions of whatever, but yeah, there's no fee that we charge.
Okay. And then this is kind of hard to answer, but how likely or what's a percentage of condos that are getting approved?
Oh, I couldn't give you a percentage, but I could tell you the majority are getting approved because you may start off as, hey, we're trying to get conventional approval, but maybe, we encountered some kind of snag. So then okay, now we're going to do an FHA. Just vice versa also. You may have the intention of closing that with an FHA loan, but there was something that prevented that FHA approval from happening. So, we're flipping it to conventional. But there's lots of avenues, we may hit a hurdle and we may just take another direction. But at the end, we really, it takes a lot to have a flat out decline.
Okay.
Because there's so many different routes that we have, and having that non-warrantable option and the non-warrantable investors that we do have, that we have partnerships with, makes it a lot easier because we can always find a path with that.
And just to be clear for everyone, correct me if I'm wrong, FHA and VA approval, that is just across the board. Any lender, once it's approved, any lender can use that. Conventional Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac is specific to each lender. So just because you're going, like if you go through movement, that doesn't mean if someone comes in somewhere else that it is approved or,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Fannie Mae has now in their database, they are reviewing some projects and are issuing a blanket approval on that. So any lender can use that. There are quite a few, but they're not a lot. So you may, hit the jackpot when you've got one of those that are already Fannie Mae approved. In that case, the only thing I'm required to review for the condo approval is the insurance, just to make sure it's still compliant. Otherwise, we just run. We don't have to get a questionnaire. We don't have to review the budget. So that saves money as well, because as you may or may not know, questionnaires are pretty pricey right now. You're looking at a couple $100 just for a copy of the HOA questionnaire. So that's money saved when there is an existing Fannie Mae approval. If you're a buyer's agent, reach out to the listing agent to see if they already have some of the documentation or information that we discussed, like the budget and the insurance or any special assessment information, or if you're aware that, hey, you know what, I think they had an inspection on the balconies. What's going on with that? Because if it happened within the past 3 years, like I had mentioned, we're required to review that inspection report to see what's going on, what had happened, what transpired, and what's been remedied.
And that's probably a good question to ask the listing agent. Like, has there been an inspection in 3 years? Because I'm sure a lot of people are not aware that that is a
Yes, that is definitely a requirement.
Yeah.
So getting information about the HOA early is the key, so that appropriate expectations can be set. That's essentially.
And then once a buyer has identified a property or is very interested in a property, we can start that condo approval as long as we have an active file. Is that correct?
Yes.
In the system. But we do have to have a loan application in the system.
Yes, you can also do a pre-submit where you don't necessarily have to have an active loan. We'll just kind of look at it, and our team will also reach out and obtain those documents at no cost to the borrower, unless it ends up closing, and then those costs would be rolled over. But otherwise, we can already start looking at that and seeing, determining whether or not the association is going to be problematic.
Awesome. Do you think there's any other major points that they should know, or does anyone have any questions? No questions.
No questions. Just the major points is, like I said, just get whatever you can ahead of time. So that way, you know, issues aren't brought up at the last minute. Because sometimes what happens is, you may have a loan and it's ready, you know, they want to do like a quick close. And on average, it's taking, you know, a few days for us to get the condominium documents when we order them from the management company or whatever service the management company uses. And that's time that, you know, so it might take me, you know, 5 days to find out, hey, this insurance is not going to work for conventional loans. But had, you know, someone known beforehand or had a copy of the insurance, we could have looked at it beforehand and, like I said, already try to work on working with the management company and the association to see if they'd be willing to revise that policy. So those are the key things, to try to just be as proactive as you can to get what information you can. Send that over to Carrie. She'll send it over to us. Again, even if it's just one document, that's fine. We'll take a look at it. We can also search the projects. Carrie knows that. I'm sure she's reached out quite a few times and said, hey, you know, can you check Fannie Mae, you know, FHA and all that to see where we stand.
And what are some major things, what are some maybe red flags or things that they should look at on the questionnaire when they receive that?
Red flags. If I were an agent and I was looking at a questionnaire, I think the first thing I would look at was there go to the question that asked if there was an inspection. And then I would know, okay, if there was not an inspection, I would breathe a sigh of relief, because I know one major hurdle is already, you know, off the list. The other would be special assessments. I would look right at the HOA questionnaire. Special assessments, yes, no. If it's a yes, know that we're going to be asking, you know, what the special assessment is for. Now, sometimes special assessments is no big deal, because what we're finding is that sometimes, because of these insurance premiums going up and they didn't anticipate it, there's special assessment just to, you know, pay for the insurance premium. So that's not a big deal. So that's an easy hurdle to get over. Or if there's special assessing to replace their roofs only because it was time. The roof was 15 years old now, and it was just time to be replaced. And it's just, you know, a standard roof replacement, you know, then that's okay as well. But the difference is, like I had mentioned before, is there an active leak in the roof? And is that why there's a special assessment now versus it's just routine repair or routine replacement?
Yeah, you just have to dig a little bit deeper on some of those things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Can you guys hear us okay?
Yeah.
Question, I often order the resale cert ahead of time, so I have it and we provide it to buyers. I'm curious if you have a little more experience and just kind of some tidbits you can give us on what a normal like reserve percentage is. If you see a resale cert and the reserves are 10% funded, or 30% funded, or 20% funded, is that something that triggers a red flag or an issue with the lender?
Okay, so here that's a great question, because that's often a misconception. So for conventional reviews, it's not how much is in the reserve account. It is how much they allocate to the reserves through their budget. So having the resale cert, having a reserve account balance amount doesn't really do me anything. What I will be looking for if I'm doing a full review for conventional lending is looking at the budget for the association for the year and making sure that they are allocating at least 10% of their budget to reserves. Do you see the difference?
Yeah, so if you had a buyer that asked you and they were like, hey man, it looks like this reserve study according to their according to their the reserve study they had done, is only 50% funded. A response you might have say is, okay, that's low compared to what I'm used to seeing, but look, 20% of their budget is going to build the reserve. So at this current HOA dues, you know, that looks like a fairly healthy situation, because at these
Yeah.
dues, they have extra money and they're building those reserves up.
Yes, because I'm not going to want to review a reserve study unless I have to review a reserve study. I don't want to open up a can of worms unless I am required to open up a can of worms. So
Okay.
if they're not following their recommendations of the reserve study, but they are allocating at least 10% to reserves based on the budget for that year, that's good enough for that. That meets guidelines.
Cool. So I had another question, just kind of thank you for all this, but
Sure.
one of the big things to me is, you know, maybe I'm a little old school. I thought the FHA approvals were very difficult and time consuming and expensive, and you got pushback from HOAs not wanting to take the time to do it. So it's good to hear that this seems like a more streamlined process. And tell me if I'm reading this wrong, but I see it as something that I could kind of use in my listing presentation if I'm meeting with somebody who's a seller of a condo. And I would say, you know, there's not a lot of agents out there that are going to go through and help you potentially get a spot approval or potentially complex FHA approval, which is going to open you up to a lot bigger market. And say that's something that I offer. It's not 100%. It doesn't always get done depending on the makeup of the HOA, but we've got a pretty good track record that the majority of the time we're able to go over there, and over the next 4 weeks while you're getting the condo ready, I can have my team working behind the scenes and get this thing approved for FHA. That just may be the buyer that buys it, and we could sell weeks sooner or tens of thousands of higher because of it.
Oh, definitely. And especially if we can do a single unit approval, the SUA. So with the like I said, our first go-to is doing an SUA, unless, you know, that's not something that the LO wants to do. Maybe they already anticipate getting many more loans in that project, and so they just said, just give us the full FHA approval. We'll work on that as well. But our first go-to is the single unit approval, because it requires less documentation, and it's much faster. The thing with that, though, is, again, it's not for new construction projects. The project has to be established. Also, it can't already have more than 10% FHA concentration. So if you look at FHA's website, it'll tell you how many loans, FHA loans, are already in the project. And if it's already at 10%, it no longer qualifies for single unit approval. And at that point, requires a full FHA approval.
That's still, I mean, yeah, I realize, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I realize there's catches, but that even just the opportunity for it and chance that it comes through, this is great.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Difference to a seller.
Yeah. And like I said, I mean, that's what we're doing right now with a lot of these conventional loans that aren't qualifying because of the high deductible, is we're just doing a single unit approval through FHA and getting them through that way.
Love it. And to the particular owner, they don't care so much if the whole complex is approved. It just means
no, they just want their unit sold.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome.
One of the questions was, who is ordering the questionnaire, the lender, or should the agent order that ahead of time?
We're happy to do it. Of course, if it's going to be faster if the agent already has it.
And what are you seeing the cost of those on average?
In Washington, I would say about $200.
Yeah.
You know, and then of course there's going to be a rush fee involved. So that's $200 standard, and that'll be, you know, up to 7 to 10 business days. If you want it sooner, you know, that's an additional, you know, $75, $100, $150 for a rush, you know.
How quickly do those expire? Like if you order one before listing, is there a chance you got to pay the $200 again if it's 30 days old or 60 days old, or
That's a great question. So we'll accept a HOA questionnaire up to 60 days, 90 days old.
It's a little risky.
Right, I think that was the last question on the chat. Does anyone else have any questions or comments?
Well, this is very helpful. My biggest challenge right now is with condos is, people think that it's this may be a little off topic, but it's a good way to go for a starter home, but then you end up with like dues that are $700 a month. Someone's got approval for 450. Now they're like, you know, it's
Yeah,
frustrating, and
that
I
is
think it's
something to watch out for. We will send out
the
max
result.
pre-approvals. We need to know if they are actively going to be looking at condos, because there is that price point where that is what is going to be what they're kind of forced into. So we need to know that up front, because people will tell me, oh, I'm looking at single family residence, and then they'll send me a condo with, like what Don says, it's got dues that are 500, 700. I mean, we're seeing dues in the $1,200 mark, depending on where the condo
They're
is located.
insane right now.
Yeah.
It's insane. And
A
to me,
lot
So,
of
that feels like it's a
a
red
lot of that
flag.
increase also has to do again with the insurance premiums going up as well. So some of it is, it has to do with that.
yeah.
That's another question I have is like when a lender sees that like on this condo, it's 800 square feet and the dues are 650 a month, are they as a lender are they going, ooh, are they underfunded? Is there something going on there? Do we need or is a lender less likely to want to lend on that condo because I see that?
No, that's not a factor when it comes to condo reviews or
Okay.
approvals. That's not something I'm going to factor in. I understand that, each condo is going to be different. Some may have, way more higher end amenities than others. It just varies, and it's not a guideline requirement that, I assess, that balance. So it's not something I'm going to be looking at.
Well, that's good to know. Because I
Yeah.
because I look at it and go, oh shit, what's the lender gonna say?
As a buyer, I might think otherwise, but
I'm
Right.
like, what's wrong?
There's another question. Our HOA dues about 10% of the sales price, and that it's really it's not necessarily a percentage. It's just on what they're budgeting and in the HOA. So there's no set percentage of what that's going to do. I mean, I've seen condos that are listed for 350,000 and their HOA dues are 650, 700 a month. So it's really, are they building those reserves? What does their overall budget look like?
yeah. And that could be the case as well. So given the age of the condominium project, they could be playing catch up with funding the reserve account. So they could have increased those HOA dues where they may have been, on the, lower or, standard amount. They may be increasing them only because they realized, oh, we haven't actually funded enough money to do some of the work that now needs to be done because of the age of the project. So they've increased their dues to fund their reserve account.
And we're seeing that more and more because of the overall
The age.
Yeah. And are you seeing that everywhere, or is that just in Washington?
No, everywhere. That's the case everywhere. I mean, and the reason these guidelines came out as far as, review inspection reports and uh, taking a closer look at the special assessments, and the reason for the special assessments is because of what had happened at in Florida with that condominium that collapsed.
Yeah,
Florida.
anything like that is Florida.
I'm with you, John, Florida.
Boy.
Any last questions? Thank you so much, Claudia. That was super helpful. I learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone else did too. I will make sure I did record this, so fingers crossed technology is in my favor, saving it. And I will send the recording out as well as the slide deck so you guys have that for reference. If you have questions about either an upcoming listing or if you have buyers looking, I am happy to always send stuff to the condo team or help you, look up for FHA and VA. If we're not finding it, I will still send it to the condo team. They're rather quick getting back to us. And then if we need to go through the approval process, I am happy to help with that as well. And we can get that started ahead of things if we need.
Definitely. And if anybody has any questions that come up after this call, please send them to Carrie and she can send those over to me and I can get those responses for you.
This was really helpful, you guys. Thanks for doing this.
You're welcome.
I was actually looking forward to this Zoom call, which is very, very rare.
Very rare. I know. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to go ahead and end it unless there's any more questions, and I will send out a follow-up email.
Great.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Claudia.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.